Good morning, and now it's time for our story. We're still in chapter 2, and if you remember rightly, last week, where the chapter we were reading, Roman got a little bit too close to the stingray tank and the jellyfish. So, this part of the story is called A Massive Blob. For a moment, I just stood there, stunned. Then my cheeks began to sting. I looked down at the floor, and lying by my feet was what looked like a massive blob of blackcurrant jelly. Ooh, I thought, jelly? As in jellyfish? Wonderful. I told you that most surprises were bad, and being smashed in the chops with a flying jellyfish is probably about the worst one I've ever had. The throbbing pain in my face rapidly got worse. "What the biggie week happened here?" said Mrs. McDonald, ending her phone call and striding toward me. Gamble ran over too. His clipboard was soaking wet, like he just, I don't know, used it to fling a poisonous sea creature at my head, perhaps. Gosh, it sounds like they've been playing tennis with a jellyfish. "You'll never believe it, Mrs. McDonald," he said, but Roman was eating a jam donut and the jellyfish saw him and he just leapt out of the tank and smacked him right in the face. Mrs. McDonald squinted at him. Pardon?" "I think that one knew it at B," I said, but my lips were turning numb and I couldn't speak properly. "Oh, as if I would," said Gamble, narrowing his eyes. "If you hadn't tried to eat that donut, this would never have happened." "Miss Clegg," said Mrs. McDonald, "did Darren do this?" "Didn't see anything," said Miss Clegg, looking up from her mobile. "Excellent." "Innocent till proven guilty," said Gamble. "That's what my uncle always says." "So," said Mrs. McDonald, "I'm supposed to believe that jellyfish just hurled itself out of the water and attacked Roman, right?" Yes, it's true," said Rosie Taylor, looking smug as she picked up her now soggy half donut from the floor. "Look what I found! Hashtag caught red-handed." Mrs. McDonald raised an eyebrow at me. So it was your fault, Roman?" "No, I mind. Hassan." My girlfriend would explain everything. She'd tell Mrs. McDonald that Gamble threw that jellyfish. Maybe she'd even pretend I had nothing to do with the donut. Mrs. McDonald turned to Jane. "Don't tell me you were involved in this too. I am most surprised." Jane's cheeks looked ready to burst and her mouth was clamped shut. She chewed repeatedly, shaking her head. Then she swallowed hard. "No, I wasn't, Mrs. McDonald. I tried to make him stop eating, but it was too late." She burst into tears. "Oh, thanks, girlfriend." By now, my face felt like it was being slowly inflated with burning hot air. Gamble carried the jellyfish on his clipboard back to its tank and just tipped it in. "I warned you about eating," sighed Mrs. McDonald before clapping her hands together. "Right, medical emergency. Rosie, run to reception and get them to call an ambulance. Roman, do not move." Rosie smiled cruelly. I started to feel sick. "Just hurry along," said Mrs. McDonald as Rosie ran off laughing. "Rest of you, line up now." The class reacted like they'd just been told the world was about to end. "But what about the shark tunnel?" said somebody. "Roman headbutts a fish and we all miss out." "Oh, thanks a lot, Dingle Lips." Dingle Lip? Ooh, strange. "Oh, boy," I said, struggling to speak. "But I'm in a lot of pain here." Nobody seemed bothered that I'd just been attacked. by a deadly sea creature. What if my skin melted? What if my face fell off? Did anybody actually care? Well, yes, someone did care. Sadly, that someone was Darren Gamble. Mrs. MacDonald, said Gamble, tugging on her sleeve. What now? Said Mrs. MacDonald. We, miss. We? I didn't like the sound of this. Gamble flashed a big grin at her. We cures jellyfish stings. We should all just wee on him. Oh, come on. Wee on Roman? A few people actually nodded as though this was a good idea. Well, I have heard that, said Miss Clegg. Darren, barked Mrs. MacDonald. Pull up your flies. If anyone's going to be weeing on that boy, it's going to be a trained doctor. This doesn't sound good for poor Roman, does it? I didn't see how this was going to be much better. Suddenly, Gamble's face lit up and he ducked out of the room. Come back, or whatever, said Miss Clegg half-heartedly. After a few moments, Gamble returned with some things in his hand. Oh, this really wasn't looking good. I shook my head violently and tried to beg him not to do it, but all that came out was... Now, Darren, said Mrs. MacDonald, put that down. Gamble was holding a potty full of wee. Hey, get that back, cried the mum from the corridor, storming into the room. Behind her, I could hear the little girl crying. Predictably, Gamble didn't listen. It's for your own good, he said, hurling the contents of the potty right at me. Fortunately, I ducked out of the way just in time. Unfortunately, Jane was still standing right behind me. Chaos! All in all, you could say that Jane took the faceful of warm toddler wee quite well. Well, you could say that, but only if it did go quite well. And meaning that she started screaming and completely freaking out. Kevin Harrison was so disturbed that he was sick in the stingray pool. Oh, yuck, that's disgusting, and it's all Roman's fault, said Rosie Taylor, who just returned to the room. The manager's on his way, Mrs. MacDonald. Maybe we can ask him to call the police so Roman gets put in jail. Oh, God, it's like an oil slick, said Gamble. Except it's an oil sick, innit? To emphasise this joke, he punched me hard in the arm. I said. I hope no one expects me to clear that up, Miss Clegg. While this was happening, Mrs. MacDonald was being yelled at by the mum of the toddler and the little girl, who now had got her potty back. She was dancing round the room with it on her head. It was chaos. In the end, the manager came and our class was asked to leave. Miss Clegg took everyone to the bus while I went to the first aid room to wait for the ambulance with Mrs. MacDonald. When the paramedics turned up, she scraped and wiped my swollen face to get rid of the poison. Then she spread some cream across the worst bits and gave me an ice pack. Bit puffy, no real damage, she said. You'll be fine with some painkillers. Get your mum to take you to the hospital if the swelling doesn't go down. Phew, I was frightened his head was going to burst, said Mrs. MacDonald. Imagine the forms and the paperwork I'd have to fill in. That's what we say, isn't it? Don't want anything going on. Don't have time for the paperwork. Oh, thanks a bunch. Nice to know you care. You're a lucky lad, said the paramedic. Lucky? I've just been hit with a flying jellyfish when all I wanted was my jam donut. I hadn't exactly got 5 numbers and the bonus ball on the lottery. I wouldn't eat anything for the rest of the day, said the paramedic, zipping up her bag, just in case you feel ill. Well, my stomach did a bit of a backflip. No food until tomorrow? I was already absolutely starving, and worst of all, no food would mean no jam donuts. I didn't usually go that long without a jam donut. What would happen to me? I'd get sick or come out in a rash or my head could fall off. This wasn't good. By the time Mum arrived to take me home, the rest of the class had been sitting in the bus for almost an hour and they were not too happy. When I got on with Mrs. McDonald to collect my lunchbox and my coat, Gamble and the few others stood up and booed me like the whole thing was my fault. Miss Clegg even joined in, which I thought was pretty bad. I tried to speak to Jane, but she just turned away and looked out of the window. My face was still burning and I dragged my feet off the bus and my mum had to drive me home. And that's the end of the chapter. And the next chapter is called Evening. So that's probably about what happens when he gets home after eating his jam donut and getting smacked in the face by a jellyfish. See you then.